Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to this week's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and thanks for tuning in for today's video. Very grateful for that. And apologize for last week, guys. If you guys are regulars to the channel, you know we missed the video last week because I was at a tournament in Kentucky. But got another one for y'all this week. We're going to be giving a detailed seminar on all of my favorite soft plastic baits. What I'm going to do here is I've got a dozen or so of them laid out. I'm going to go through each category, each profile of soft plastic bait, and tell you the scenario that it works best in. We'll talk about colors, conditions, all that type of stuff. And I think it's going to really give you guys a good foundation for your soft plastic fishing in today's episode. Also, guys, before we get started, just a couple quick housekeeping tips to keep the lights on around here. If you guys like what's going on in advanced bass fishing and you get a lot out of this seminar, guys, some of the best things you can do is hit that subscribe button. That's a big deal too. And probably if you want to do anything at all to help the channel out, the best thing you can do is use my Tackle Warehouse link. If you have to have any fishing tackle purchases, just bookmark that link. And anytime you guys want to order tackle from Tackle Warehouse, if you use that link, the channel gets a small percentage of the commission on the baits you buy. So that's a really good way to support the channel. And also, guys, just a quick reminder, during the spring, excuse me, got a spring sale on my SolarBat RB2 and RB3 series sunglasses. If you get a pair during the spring sale, you can get them at 25% off. And any purchase over $100, you get basically a $30 grab bag full of stuff from SolarBat. So if you guys are interested in that, I'll put my SolarBat link in the description. You guys can get you a good pair. I'd recommend also the Hycon yellow lens. Man, those things you can see forever in the water with them. So anyway, let's get into this, guys, here. This is going to be a little bit different video here because it's I'm not going to go into the rigging on the soft plastics. Suffice to say, I'll talk a little bit about maybe some different weights and everything, but every one of these baits that I'm talking about here, they're for Texas rigging. And the hooks that I use, I'll just talk a little bit about the hooks that I use and the weights before we get into the video. But on every one of these soft plastic lures, guys, I use the straight shank Gamakatsu G-Finesse heavy cover worm hook. I find that that's the best hook that you can use in these. I'll put the link in the description for them too if you guys want to pick up some of those. And then the slip sinker size varies upon the situation. We'll talk a little bit about that in the video. And most of the time, I just peg them with a toothpick. Guys, I've experimented a bunch with bobber stoppers and different type of rubber peggets. And I think that a round toothpick is the best thing to use to peg your sinkers because you can control the tension on it really good. Haven't had any issues with it, so I just wanted to clarify that. So anyway, guys, what we're going to do here is I'm going to go through, I picked out about a dozen of these are my favorite soft plastic baits. These are the ones that do all my heavy lifting. I use these, some variation of these 12 pretty much all throughout the year in my fishing out there. So I'm going to sort of go through each one of them and explain to you the scenarios they work good in and talk a little bit about that. We'll get into that. Okay, the first one we'll talk about, guys, because it's sort of like a good springtime lure. So let's talk about the old Lizard. This is the Zoom Lizard. All of the soft plastics I got here, guys, also, these are all Zoom soft plastics. And I'll put my Zoom link in the description of the Tackle Warehouse if you guys are interested in any of these. But the old Lizard, man, this has been, the Lizard, it was sort of like it was the grandfather of the creature baits because you have the more modern creature baits like the Zoom Brush Hog, but the Lizard was actually one of the first lures out there that was some type of a departure from just a regular plastic worm. For so many years, this was the only soft plastic was available to anchor, was just either a straight-tailed or a curly-tailed worm. And the Lizard was one of the first sort of alternate creature baits. And guys, it's still just as effective today. The Lizard does not get the attention that it used to simply because there's so much out there. I mean, there's so many soft plastic companies and they've all got some type of variation and modification of an existing soft plastic, but the Lizard still remains a really good selection out there, especially this time of year. Now, the time that I like to Lizard, guys, and a lot of this that I'm going to be talking about, it has to do with a combination of water clarity and water temperature as far as the ideal scenarios with them. Now, first, before we get into this, you can catch fish 12 months out of the year on any one of these baits I'm talking about. I'm sort of like trying to identify the window that it's the best in. So as far as for the Lizard goes, let's talk a little bit about the water temperature and the water clarity. You're going to find that your lizard is like the magic zone for the lizard is when the water temperature is in the mid to upper 50s. That is going to be when it excels by far better than anything. So when that water temperature starts to get around 55 degrees and up until it gets 60, maybe low 60s like that, that is the premium water temperature window for a lizard. Now, again, a lot of this, when you're talking about water temperature and water clarity, why it works, it just is what it is. Don't try to overanalyze it. What I have determined here, this is from decades and decades of experimentation on my own. What I have seen works the best here. So for the lizard type of thing, when that water temperature hits 55 and on up in the 60s, this is one of my favorite baits to throw there. With that is the right type of water clarity. Now, the water clarity on a lizard also will vary based upon the color lizard that you're using. For the most part, I either like a green pumpkin or a black lizard. Now, the green pumpkin is going to be my choice to go to anytime that water visibility is over, like, say, 2.5 foot of visibility. I'm usually using a green pumpkin or some type of watermelon lizard, usually dyeing the tail of it chartreuse a little bit. And if the water visibility is under 2 foot, that's when I go to like a black lizard or maybe a June bug, something darker like that. But that's sort of my rule of thumb with that. Another thing with that is there's several different lengths of a lizard. You got the 6-inch variation and the 8-inch variation. Most of the time, this is the 8-inch right here. Most of the time, if I'm pitching it and flipping it, I'm using the 8-inch size. And if I'm throwing it on a Carolina rig, which a lizard is probably the best Carolina rig bait out there, I like the 6-inch lizard on a Carolina rig. And as far as slip sinkers goes, one of the things you'll find out about a lizard, there's every one of these baits that I'm talking about, you use different weights of slip sinkers based upon how thick your cover is and how deep the water is and how hard the wind's blowing. But if you can get by with it, guys, try to go with a 3/16 ounce sinker. I've experimented with all different sinker sizes on lizard, and there's something about the fall of a lizard on a 3/16 ounce sinker that I just get a lot of bites with it. So that's sort of my scenario with the lizard there. Okay, that's the lizard. Next one is to get into a little bit similar to that as far as a creature bait, more modern one, and that's the Zoom Brush Hog here, guys. Now, the Zoom Brush Hog comes in, this is the full size one. They've got 3 or 4 different sizes. They got a tiny brush hog, they got a medium size one, they got a baby brush hog, but nevertheless, it's still a brush hog. It's got the curly tails, it's got the flappers on it. Brush hog has been around for a long time. This is one of the first creature baits. It is a big fish bait. I've caught a bunch of good ones on a brush hog. It's super versatile. You can use it on a football head jig as a trailer. You can bite it in half and use it like that. You can Carolina rig with it. But obviously my favorite is flipping and pitching it. Now the brush hog's a little bit, the scenario as far as the time of year that it works is a little bit different. Obviously, when you're talking about using it as like a trailer on a football head jig, that's sort of like a post-spawn summertime deal. But specifically, I want to talk about these primarily as the Texas rigs, and I'm going to also throw some alternatives as far as swim jig trailers in there, but let's talk about the brush hog in terms of a Texas rig on there. Brush hog, when you're talking about a brush hog as far as a flipping and pitching bait, one of the best scenarios that I have found with the brush hog has been if you have high water where you've got flooded cover. There's something about a brush hog and flooded cover that just gets lots of bites. So if you got flooded bushes, flooded willow trees, flooded trees, anything like that, just an outstanding lure to use with that. Brush hog is going to work in a wide range of water visibilities too, very similar to a lizard, except there's something about a brush hog that the window of time that it works in water temperature wise is a lot greater than the lizard. Again, one of those mysteries in fishing, we don't really know, but a brush hog is a really good pitching and flipping bait anytime between when the water is in the 50s all the way through. It warms up to the warmest part of the year, and when it drops down back into the 50s in the fall time of the year. So I'll usually start using a brush hog sometime in March, and I'll use it all the way through November or December. It's really good all year long there. It's a really good bait to flip and pitch grass in. Shallow grass, water willows, milfoil, hydrilla, lily pads, really good with that. It's a good bait to fish around docks. Use a lot of, dock fishing with it. And there's two different sinker sizes that I use with the brush hog. If I'm pitching it and flipping it around clean cover, say for example, if I'm flipping it under a dock pier or on the end of a stump or something like that, I like throwing a 3/16 ounce sinker. It's got a nice slow falls slow, just fast enough to get the tails wiggling on it. But if I'm pitching it and flipping it, I'm usually going to a 5/16 when I'm like going over limbs or something like that. But a brush hog is a really good alternative to a jig. If you don't like fishing a jig, which a lot of people, for whatever reason, they don't have a lot of confidence in jigs, a brush hog will get bit in the same places that a jig will get in there. So it's just a really good deal. And also, guys, with the colors on all these, the colors are pretty much unique as far as uniform in the same type of water clarities I'm talking about. So in general, when you're talking about your green pumpkins and your watermelons, something like that, use them in water visibility over 2 to 2.5 foot in visibility. And then if you get into water visibilities of under 2 foot, go to your darker colors like your black and blues, your black, June bug, red bug, something that silhouettes it out there a little bit more with that. And most of the time on this one, I'm using like a 3 or 4 Gamakatsu straight shank, heavy cover worm hook like we talked about. I'll talk about the favorite sizes in here. And also on the lizard, guys, most of the time I'm using the 3/0 in the lizard there. So that's the brush hog. Now, as the size on it, guys, a lot of it depends on, just the type of cover I'm fishing. I really, out of all the 4 sizes, I use the baby brush hog and the full size one most of the time. And it's just experimentation to see what size they want. You sort of just have to test them out and try them a little bit with that. Okay, the next one, guys, I'll sort of go through the creature baits and we'll get into the worms here a second. The next one is the Zoom Z-Hog. Now this would be similar to like a beaver. The sweet beaver came out originally, but this is sort of the same type of a deal. It's a creature bait that doesn't have any moving legs on it. That's the thing that's unique about it. And the Z-Hog like this and the beaver or anything like that, it's probably accounted for more successful tournaments for guys than about any other soft plastic out there. This is probably the #1 pitching and flipping type bait aside from a jig is the beaver or the Z-Hog type bait here. And the thing about it is like you don't really know because this thing, it doesn't have any action when it falls through the water. So it's all about the profile. There's something about the profile of the bait that, it can look like a perch or a crawdad depending upon how you got it colored up. But again, shallow water cover, pitching and flipping around whatever objects you have. It could be grass, it could be wood, it could be docks, whatever is available in there. And the thing that you're going to find out about like a beaver or a Z-Hog or something like that, again, it has a very wide range of conditions that it works in terms of water clarity and cover and time of year. Just like the brush hog, guys, I use this thing all the way from March to December. All year long, works good in any situation without there. The water visibility the same way. Most of the time, I use that 2.5 foot gauge as far as, the colors that I'm using on it. And the difference between like when you've got a brush hog and a beaver, say for example, like how do you choose between the two? If you want to do some pitching and flipping, how do you know, do they want a brush hog? Do they want a Z-Hog or do they want a lizard? How do you know? The only way you know, guys, is to experiment a little bit. Here's how you do that too. Let's say, for example, you go out with a brush hog and you're flipping boat docks with it and you fish 30 boat docks and you catch 3 fish on a brush hog. So you sort of got an idea that there's some fish on the boat docks. How you determine the best profile and the type of soft plastic they want is you just have to try it. Once you get into an area where there's some fish in there, just change the brush hog out for the Z-Hog and fish it for 15 or 20 minutes. See if you have any success on it. Let the fish tell you what they want. And that is a piece of wisdom in fishing that can't be talked about enough. You can have an idea what to begin with, but ultimately you have to let the fish tell you what they want because the mood and the personality of the fish, it changes with things we don't understand. You've got weather variables, you've got lake condition variables that all play a role in it, But ultimately, what determines if a bass wants a certain lure profile or color is sort of a mystery. It really is. I mean, I'll tell you, for example, like that tournament I just got back, the Toyota Series at Kentucky Lake. There was one color crankbait that was outproduced in any other color that I was using. I tried a bunch of other colors, and for whatever reason, this one particular color that was sort of like a green type of a color, it just outproduced any other color. And I don't really know why, because it didn't really look any better in the water than some other ones, but I let the fish tell me with that through experimentation with it. Okay, guys, that's the first three. I'm gonna take a little break and get a drink, and I'll be right back. Okay, guys, we're back now. I'm gonna follow up. I got two more different creature type baits that I'm gonna talk about. Then we're gonna get into the more worms. Next one I'm talking about, guys, is this Zoom Z-Craw. Now, again, this is sort of a modification. You had the Z-Hog that didn't have the curly tail legs first. A couple years later, this Z-Craw came out that is basically like it's like the Z-Craw, the same body profile with some curly legs on it. Now, here's the difference between the two. It comes in the junior size, and this is the full size here. The difference is the action of the legs here. That's what makes the difference with it. Most of the time, what you're gonna find out is when you have a creature bait that has some type of a curly leg on it, it tends, not all the time, but it tends to be a little bit better in water that's a little bit warmer, and also water that's a little bit more off color. That it's the vibration from the tails moving with that, and the action of the tails, or something about the metabolism of the bass in a little bit warmer water that reacts better to some type of a curly tail. Also with the curly tails, actually I'll talk about both of these. This is a Zoom Ultra Vibe Speed Craw here and the Z-Craw here. Both of these are very similar because they're curly tail creature baits. The tail, number one, is going to slow the fall down a little bit because there's more drag, gives the bait a little bit more action. And also, guys, these are excellent swim jig trailers and chatterbait trailers. So for whatever reason, I use both of these Texas rigged and on a swim jig and as a chatterbait. Works really good. But when I'm talking about in terms of the curly tail creature baits like this, they're really good to be used with heavier sinkers, because the heavier the sinker will get these tails wagging faster. So most of the time, the difference between using, the creature baits like this with the tails on it versus something other is I like to use maybe 5/16 up to 3/4 ounce weight on here. This is good for punching mats, flipping it into thick, heavy cover. Just really, really good for the thick cover. But one of the ways that I really like to fish these is in the heat of the summer. If I've got dirty water, like water visibility of 1 to 2 foot, I put these on like a pretty heavy sinker, like a 1/2 ounce sinker, and I pitch it and flip it around shallow cover that's in dirty water and hot water, and you really get a good reaction strike to this. So that's my two favorite for that. Take a quick break here, guys. I just saw my wife shoot me a text. I'm going to respond to it, and I'll give it right back. Okay, guys, now we're going to move on with the more traditional plastic worms, the curly-tailed worms. I got a couple tubes here and some straight-tailed worms. Every time you change profile in a soft plastic lure, you're basically appealing to a different type of personality or mood to the fish. Soft plastics, when you're talking about in terms of actions they have and the profile that they have and the diameter of the plastic, every one of those is conducive to being better under certain conditions. For example, it's like, if you're in dirty, muddy water, you're probably not going to catch a lot of fish on just a little small straight-tailed worm. Probably need, some type of a more bulky, beefy profile. And if you're in real clear water, you're probably not going to catch as many fish on a bait like this as you would like the little finesse worm here. So let's get into some of the more traditional ones. Now, the first one, guys, I want to talk about is probably the most famous one. That's just a soft plastic stick bait. This is the Zoom's Linky, or the Senko is probably more famous out here. Guys, this is one of my favorite all-time bass catchers. As a matter of fact, if you told me, Randy, you can just have one soft plastic lure from now on, it would be a soft plastic stick bait, a 5 or 6 inch like here, because it's so versatile. You can bite it off on the end and you can make a Ned rig out of it. You can fish a Texas rig. You can fish a wacky rig. You can fish a chatterbait trailer, just a ton of stuff that you can do with it. And this type of bait is always going to remain productive because it's very natural and it doesn't telegraph itself. So many of the lures that a bass gets conditioned to, it's because of a unique sound or a vibration. But a bait like this doesn't have any sound. It's supernatural. It's like an earthworm. They're always going to bite it. Now, the couple of different situations I fished this, my favorite way to fish a soft plastic stick bait is Texas rigged with a light sinker. I don't really like fishing it weightless. A lot of people do, except for when I'm wacky rigging it. We'll talk about in a second. But my favorite way to fish a soft plastic stick bait is fishing on a light sinker, like an 1/8 ounce sinker, and just pitching it and flipping it around shallow targets. In the springtime of the year, I do really like it for a wacky rig. I'm sorry, a shaky head. A lot of people use a shaky head on more of a finesse type worm, which is good. But in the springtime of the year, this bulkier profile like this, I catch a lot of fish on like an 1/8 ounce shaky head. And then finally, just the wacky rigging. Just the wacky rigging is probably one of the most well-known ways to fish a soft plastic stick bait. Can't beat it like that. It's just highly productive with it. But one of my favorite techniques to fish a soft plastic stick bait is I take my flipping stick, put it on an 1/8 ounce sinker, sometimes even a 16th ounce sinker. If the wind's not blowing much, I'll put it on 12 to 15 pound test fluorocarbon line, and I'll methodically and slowly pitch it around shallow, super shallow targets. Now, when you're fishing this on like a 16th ounce Texas rig or 1/8 ounce or something like that, and you can pitch it in that really shallow water. If those fish are shallow and spooky, especially like they are in the springtime of the year, super good way to catch them. This thing works all year. It's not just a wacky rig springtime deal. This is one of my favorite flipping and pitching baits in the summertime when it gets really hot. And again, like any other thing, darker colors and dirtier water, more, colors like this and the cleaner water. But one little tip I'll give you with this, guys, if you're fishing docks in the summertime and you got water visibility anywhere between like say 1.5 to 4 feet, pitching this thing around docks and working it real slow on a light sinker, I get a ton of bites on it. That's the technique a lot of people don't just fish on there. So that's that there. Now the next one, guys, this is a Zoom Magnum finesse worm. Now the finesse worm that most people are familiar with is the same length here and smaller diameter, but this is a beefy, fat little finesse worm here. And even though it's a small bait, it's a short, small profile bait, the bulk of it here makes it really good in off-colored water. And one of my favorite techniques to fish this Zoom Magnum finesse worm here is I take this solid black one here, I put it on an 1/8 ounce sinker, and I pitch it in and around shallow cover in off-colored, dirtier water. So my favorite way that I've caught tons of fish on this is an 1/8 ounce sinker, water visibility of about 12 inches. Again, pitching it, flipping it slowly around that shallow wood cover. Now, one of the things that you'll find about soft plastics when you're dealing with the more diminutive small sizes like this, if you go to a dark color, you can catch bass in really, really shallow, dirty water that wouldn't bite anything else out there. They're not gonna bite a jig. They're not gonna bite a larger soft plastic, but they bite something that's really, really finessey with a light sinker on it. It's almost like it's subtle, they're spooky, they're in shallow water anyway. They don't wanna chase a bait very far. They don't want a big bait. I've caught a ton of fish in dirty water flipping this black one. And also this works pretty good as a shaky head too. I've caught a lot of fish on it, just shaky heading around with it. So really highly productive with that. Now the next one, guys, is talk a little bit about the traditional trick worms. Some type of a finesse worm, something like that. And hold on one second, guys. I got a bird in the tackle worm. I got to get it out. I'll be right back. Sorry about that, guys. Got the bird out of the garage here. So anyway, we're dealing now with this category of soft plastics. This is the Zoom Magnum Shaky Tail here. Everybody's familiar with probably the Zoom Trick Worm. But guys, this Magnum Shaky Tail is my favorite finesse type worm. It's got a real pencil thin tail on it. Got a lot of action. And guys, I've caught so many fish on a finesse worm and a lot of different ways to fish it. This is probably the #1 lure I use on a shaky head, 16th ounce, 1/8 ounce shaky head. Love it for that situation. But then again, for the Texas rig, the finesse, when you're flipping and pitching like a trick worm or a finesse worm or just a straight small profiled worm, it's sort of like that Magnum finesse worm. It's really good with a light sinker, methodically flipping it and pitching it in that shallow off-colored water. Now this is one of the things I want to reiterate this. When I'm talking about flipping these different type of soft plastics with a light weight, this is something I figured out that has worked when you can't get bites doing anything else. A lot of people, they associate, say for example, we're in the back of a creek and the water visibility's 8 or 10 inches and you got some lay down logs and stuff in there. Most people say, well, I need to fish a square bill crankbait or a spinner bait or flip a jig or a creature bait in that dirty water. If you got warm water, dirty water, you're gonna catch a lot more fish on these small diameter worms like this. Really, really good way to catch on it. Another way that I like to fish some type of a trick worm or Magnum shaky tail is on what's called a split shot rig. What I'll do is I'll take just like an 1/8 ounce split shot, just like you can get them wherever, just to crimp on there like people catfish with, put about a 15-inch leader on it, and it's like a Carolina rig, but instead of the Carolina rig weights, you got just the round split shot. Really good way to catch them in clear water, tough situations. Next one, guys, is the traditional ribbon tail worm. This is the Zoom Old Monster. This is one of the oldest profile worms out there. The ribbon tail has been around for, over 50 years. This is one of the greatest all-time bass catchers of all time. Now, 2 different ways that I fish a ribbon tail. One is just traditional Texas rigging. And for ribbon tail fishing, I don't really like it too much around flipping and pitching it around shallow cover. Not that it won't work, but when I'm fishing a ribbon tail worm, I'm usually casting it into deeper water, around deeper brush piles and on points, that type of stuff. Texas rigging it without pegging the sinker. I let the sinker slide freely, usually anywhere between 1/4 to 5/16 ounce, depending on the depth that I'm fishing. But this is what's called my structure worm. I'm probing drop-offs and deeper water with it for the most part with the curly tail. Another way that you can catch them on a curly tail worm like this, which is really good, is swimming it for suspended fish around cover. So if you have a lake that has some off-colored water in it, like water visibility of less than 3 feet, and you've got some type of vertical cover, like standing timber or docks or something like that, in the summertime, you can take these ribbon tail worms, put them on like a 3/16 sinker, cast them out there and just reel them suspended through that timber and through the sides of those docks. Catch a lot of fish doing that. And also, this is really good if you have grass that comes to the surface. Put like a 16th ounce weight on it and just throw out and just reel this thing across the surface, or maybe let it go about 1 inch under the surface. It's a really good way to catch them on grass. But just the cast, and this is one of the best, also one of the best pond baits. If you guys fish ponds, a ribbon tail worm's really good. Next one, guys, is what I call the category of worms that has it's a straight tail worm with a curl tail. Now, this is a Zoom Z-Craw worm here. This is one of my favorite worms again. A lot of different ways to fish this, pitching and flipping it around shallow cover. You can fish it on structure. A lot of times I'll bite it down, make it shorter like this, pitching it, flipping it around shallow cover. You can use it as a swim jig with the trailer. This Zoom Z-Craw worm, I love it. I catch a ton of fish on it. It's fairly new. It's only been out for a couple of years. But the best that I've done on this is I bite it down to like 4 or 5 inches, put like a 1/4 ounce sinker around it. Again, pitching it, flipping it just around whatever shallow cover that I have. Now the next one, guys, is something you probably don't see very much. It's the old school craw. This is just like an old Jean LaRue salt craw. This is one of the original craws out there. And guys, even though this is pretty rudimentary and pretty basic, there's nothing flashy about it, I still catch a lot of fish on it. It's really good as a jig trailer. It's good to pitch and flip around on a Texas rig, catch a lot of fish like that. I've used it on a shaky head. But at times, I have seen that they like this craw trailer better than like the new craws. Like some of the new craws out there, they're very realistic and lifelike. Like that Zoom little critter craw, it looks just like a crawdad, but under certain situations, this old school, old-fashioned craw is still one of my favorite lures out there. And finally, guys, is the tube. The old school tube here, another old school bait. This is another lure that's sort of under the radar. It was like at one period back in the 90s, this had taken over everything as far as pitching and flipping. Denny Brauer won the 1998 Classic on this thing. This is an outstanding flipping and pitching a bait, again, and around shallow cover, flooded cover, just pitching it and flipping it like on a 3/16 ounce sinker. I almost won a Bassmaster tournament, the Bassmaster Top 150 tournament down at Lake Eufaula in Alabama. Denny Brauer beat me by 1 ounce in that tournament. and I was flipping and pitching this exact tube on a little 1/8 ounce sinker in that real shallow gator grass. So flipping and pitching a tube is one of my favorite ways to catch them, especially when the water's a little bit warmer, and especially if you got flooded cover. This is one of the best lures that you can throw for flipping and pitching flooded bushes and that type of stuff. So anyway, guys, let me take a quick break here and we're gonna wrap it up. That's pretty much the plastics here. I'll be right back. Okay, guys, that's just an overview of my favorite soft plastics, the one that I use most of the time. The ones that I showed you in today's video are the ones that I use as far as for pitching and flipping and casting and the type of techniques we're talking about. Probably 95% of my bass fishing is done with just the lures I showed you guys right there. And one of the things about it, when you're dealing with soft plastic lures, it can be super intimidating, because if you guys have ever been in a large tackle store, or if you surf around on Tackle Warehouse on their soft plastics, line up there are just an overwhelming amount of plastics out there. There's so many companies that make it. There's so many like new stuff that comes out, and there's modifications on existing stuff. You can't buy everything. I mean, you can't buy every color, and you can't buy every lure out there. So you sort of have to formulate, something that's manageable. And I think that if you try the baits that I tried here in the video, I think you guys will, have some good success on it. Finally, a little bit about the colors, guys. Don't sweat the colors that much. Think in terms of natural colors or dark colors out there and versus with your water clarity. In general, any type of green pumpkin or watermelon, it doesn't matter if it has flake in it or not. There's a lot of flake variations, but any type of a watermelon or green pumpkin is going to be very good if the water visibility is over like 3 foot clarity. That's the colors you want to use. And you can really get creative with those by using different type of dyes on the tails. And if the water visibility is under 3 feet, that's when your darker colors come into play, like your June bug, your red bugs, your blacks. Also on darker low light days, the darker is going to be a little bit better. And also you'll find early in the year, dark is a little bit better. I've caught a lot more fish like on black and June bug in the springtime of the year or pre-spawn than I have when it's a little bit warmer out there. But anyway, guys, that's just sort of an overview. That's the stuff that I like here. Again, I use, tungsten bullet sinkers out there. I use that Gamakatsu straight shank. I'll link a bunch of this stuff in the description of the video, my Tackle Warehouse link, so you guys want to pick up some. But anyway, hope it helps you guys catch a few fish, and we'll be back next week with another one.